Hey folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Secure IT 360, coming at you with another episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. Today we have on the show again Tyler Roberts. How's it going, man?
Going great, going great.
Awesome. So today we're doing another tool time. So Darius and I a few weeks ago did a tool time on Dark GPT. Tyler and I are going to do a tool time on two different tools, one of those being OneDriveEnum and the other being AD Miner. Those tools you may have heard of before if you're kind of in the scene and kind of been around a little bit. OneDriveEnum and AD Miner are relatively new tools that have come out in the recent within like last year. I would say. I don't know when the Black Hat talk is. You'll get to that, Tyler. But so today it's about OneDriveEnum and AD Miner. We're going to share our screens. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how we use those tools, the value it provides us, and everything in between. So we're looking forward to this episode. I hope you check it out on YouTube. For those who are just listening to the podcast, there's going to be like a shared screen element to this. So go check this out on YouTube if you're listening to it somewhere else. So awesome. So Tyler, OneDriveEnum. Lay down the law here on OneDriveEnum. What's it all about? Why is it an interesting tool? Why is it kind of making waves in the security community and all that?
Yeah, before we talk about the tool, I want to talk about what the tool abuses and kind of the flaw that Microsoft put in to OneDrive, I guess, without thinking about it, that they still haven't acknowledged or, said they're going to fix. But so when you have an organization that has OneDrive enabled, whenever you use your organization account for things such as sending files in Teams, using Outlook to compose email, using any of the Microsoft Suite apps and saving those, all those files get saved to your OneDrive. And when things get saved up to your OneDrive, there's a vanity URL for your account that those go to, right? So every user that's ever used one of those services in one way or another has a vanity URL. Whether things are saved there or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just if at one point or another they use that, there's that URL. And that's kind of the key piece that OneDriveEnum works off of. There's a few different parts that roll into it. So you need to know the email format of the organization that you want to leverage this tool against. That's important. You need to know their domain. And then OneDriveEnum will actually go out and find their SharePoint tenant and find that URL that they can plug usernames into, which I'll show in a moment. So that's just a little bit of background on the tool and kind of how it came to light. So Nick's Geek did write this tool, so big shout out to him for this. It's great. We use it on all our engagements, but I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
And while you're pulling that up, Tyler and I did another episode called The State of Microsoft 365 Attacks, and we're doing a couple series of those episodes. We've gotten through two now. We've got another one to do coming up that we're going to do with Darius on post-exploitation, but Tyler and I did an episode on enumeration or enumeration type of attacks against Microsoft 365. So that's episode 97. So you can go check that out where we talk about other types of enumeration attacks and tools that we use for enumeration on top of OneDriveEnum. So just a shout out for that episode.
Yep. To start, so depending on how you're running the tool, I just run it straight command line. I think that's the only way to run it. We do have a fork of the tool that I've added like 5 or 6 lines of code into, and that's just to populate usernames to a file as they're found. Normally, usernames are saved to a SQL database and then they're written to a file. So, that's how the original tool works. We just added some additional functionality for our specific use case. Install is pretty straightforward. You're just going to do a git clone of the repo. Obviously, this is our private repo, so you won't be able to pull this one, but the official repo you will.
Can you zoom in a little bit on the session?
Better?
Yeah, there we go.
Cool.
Nice.
Next, installing requirements.txt, which I think I should have everything already. Perfect. The last part, so this is where you're going to need to know the email format of the organization you're attacking. Here I have a results.txt file. So this is a list of permutated names that I've created based off the format of Secure IT 360's organization, which is our organization. I think primarily now we use first initial last name format. So that's the permutations in those files. I took the names from the 1990 census, wrote a little script, and I just added the first initial A through Z to each last name. And that's what that file is. I'll explain a few of the flags before I run this. So the -D, this is obviously the domain of the organization that you want to leverage this against. And then the -U, this is where you specify your user file. You can do the full path to the file, and it can be wherever. It doesn't have to be in the folder on your Kali box, wherever you're running this, but that needs to be the file that you want to use to brute force with. So after you run
ASCII art is impeccable. Nick's Geek did a really good job on the ASCII art, which reminds me, I've got a project where I'm cataloging all of like the cybersecurity tool, infosec tool, offsec tool, ASCII art on my GitHub, and I need to add this one.
Actually, I create my own ASCII art, so hey, not really. I have tools to do it for me. All right. Anyway, so after you run the tool, it's going to identify the tenant that you're attacking as well as the OneDrive host. The big key thing here is what's highlighted on the screen. So this is actually the URL that's being brute forced against. So if you see this user parameter right here, so every username that's in my results.txt file is actually being sent against that URL or being inputted into that URL where that user name is. And based off the response code, there's two that you can get that it's a valid user. So you can get a 403 response code, that's a valid user. You can also get a 401 response code, and that's a valid user. And depending on the size of the organization, depends on how fast you're going to get usernames back. So obviously with smaller organizations, it's going to be a little bit more of a slow burn since we have 4.2 million different usernames to go through. This will take a while. However, this is a very, very, very unique and efficient way to enumerate usernames out of an organization. What we see when we run this tool typically is a lot of the usernames, I'd say probably 60% of the ones that we get back from the tool are not ones that we've got from our other OSINT processes, from different spider tools that find these usernames and emails out on the internet. So this is very, very good for helping us with subsequent attacks, such as our password sprays and things like that, since, the more users you have, the higher the likelihood for successful initial access.
Yep.
So as the usernames pop up on the screen, they're also written to a file. So this is unique to our tool. I don't think this happens in the main tool like this. Like I said, they are saved to a SQL database, so you can pull those out of the SQL database at any point while the tool's running. But as the usernames pop up on the screen, they're written to this file. And so what we'll do is we'll take these usernames, populate them into our email file, and then remove all the duplicates. And, typically, like I said, around 60% of those we won't have. So.
Now, what's the capture percentage that you've seen on engagements as like how many usernames or email formats have you captured versus how many total the organization or the firm has?
Yeah, so I'd say
60%, 20%. What kind of the breakdown?
I'd say in an organization that has around 200 users, we'll end up with 160 probably. Yep. So, we only have a day of OSINT before we're doing other processes like vulnerability discovery and exploitation. So obviously this can't run throughout the entire engagement, and this does take a while to get through every username. So, if this was allowed to run to its full capacity, I'd say it'd probably get 90% total because of how many permutations there are. But the other thing this depends on is, the email format of the organization, like you mentioned earlier. So if your first name dot last name, it's going to be substantially harder to enumerate users, because instead of there being 4 million permutations, there's going to be like, I don't know, 25 million.
Right.
So there's substantially more users in that file that you're going to have to go through.
Yep.
So you're still going to find a few users, but it's not going to be as many as an organization that's, first name would be the easiest to enumerate, and then, first initial, last name,
Yep.
or,
Now,
first name,
now what
last
about
initial as
like
well.
international names, like non-American type English speaking names?
You're talking names with like special characters and things of that
special
nature?
characters, tildes, things like that. Is that in the word list as well, or is that something that you kind of customize?
No. So the list we're using is a list from the 1990 census. So primarily the names you're going to see there are, native names to, the U.S. The more common names in the U.S. are going to be in that list. So, anything with, special characters in the names are probably not going to be caught, as well as like your longer, more complex names as well.
Yep. Is that something that you think could be customized for the client? Like if they're an international client, I think, a majority of our clients are probably US based, but we do have international clients in, Canada and South America and Europe, things like that. Is that something that can be customized? Have you played around at all with customizing that for international like languages and stuff?
I really haven't had to, but I bet it'd be as simple as a Google search of common names in other countries.
Yep.
And pulling those and permutating based off that.
Yeah.
Because, that information, I would imagine, is probably widely available. So,
yeah, it's kind of funny because my grandpa used to tell me that my last name, so his last name, was as common as Smith in like Italy. So my great grandparents are from Italy, from Sicily. And I remember my grandpa growing up telling me as a kid, like, yeah, Alessi, my last name, is, like a John Smith or a Jane Doe type thing. Like it's very common and like it's used quite often. And I went to Ellis Island, saw our last name on the thing, and I'm like, oh, maybe there's some truth to that. If there's like the Smith equivalent in Italy. So I digest. Digest.
In our case, I'll run another script just using the first names, because I imagine we probably have quite a few like yours that are just first name specific. So it's much faster because there's much less usernames, but you'll just change the username file to the first names.txt, run this, and this will be substantially quicker. But as you can see, wow, we have quite a few. So there's only 100,000 users in here, so this would probably take 20 minutes to run through. But, if you do run into an organization that has two different email formats, like a newer organization or a smaller one that was using first name format at first and then changed, clearly there's value there as well. So, we got 6, 7 emails here running first initial last name. And then we've already got, 10 plus from running just first name specific. So, multiple use cases based off email format. Like I said, you can create your own Python scripts and mutate the name files that, the tool has to create what you need.
Yep. Cool. Now, as far as mitigations go, I know mitigating this essentially means disabling SharePoint, right, for your user base.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like, okay, what does this mean? What should I be cognizant of? And, what are your recommendations for this?
Yeah. So mitigations are tough for this. There are mitigations that you can put in place, and that's disabling those unique URLs that are created, those vanity URLs that are created. However, when you do that, you can't send files in Teams anymore because those files are saved up to that vanity URL. So, that's the biggest functionality I know that breaks, that turns a lot of organizations off from doing the fix. In talking with Brad, him and I discussed, and, implementing the fix, I wouldn't really say is the thing that you should do. what you should do is assume that every email in your organization is public and that an attacker has every single one of your emails, and then create protections around your accounts based off of that information, right? So implement geofencing, conditional access policies, enforce MFA on all your user accounts, provide those backend protections to your accounts because, they're already public anyway, via this tool, via spidering, and other ways that attackers know how to get emails. So ensuring that there's ample protections on the back end for those accounts that prevent initial access after a successful password and things of that nature are I'd say more paramount than disabling vanity URLs and actually implementing the workaround fix to this.
Yep, for sure. Awesome. Anything else you want to share about OneDriveEnum?
No, I think that's it. That's a proper rundown of the tool. Just a little showcase of it.
Cool. Yeah, that was really good, Tyler. I think it's always cool to see kind of a peek behind the curtains, tools of the trade kind of thing. And again, shout out to Nick's Geek for doing a lot of research. He works at Trusted Sec, doing a ton of research on that. He had a Black Hat talk, and obviously he released that tool and has been updating it over time. So kudos to him as well. All right, so AD Miner. So now we're gonna switch gears, and so that was an external enumeration tool. Now we're gonna look at an internal tool, or a tool I use for internal pen testing that sysadmins can use as well. And I definitely encourage you to use it because it's a great tool. So let me pull my screen up. Okay, cool. So AD Miner. AD Miner, as it says here, is an Active Directory audit tool that leverages Cypher queries to crunch data from Bloodhound. So essentially what it does is you capture a Bloodhound database, you run this tool, it creates an HTML report, and it shows you all the things that are wrong in the environment. So it shows you all the attack paths, all the interesting misconfigurations, and the interesting edges that you would normally see in Bloodhound. It shows them in kind of a nice format. What I like about this, and this was developed by Mazars Tech, so definitely go check this out on their GitHub and give them kudos. But essentially how this works is this AD Miner tool has a whole bunch of Cypher queries that these folks have created in addition to and above and beyond what's built into Bloodhound, the Community Edition by default. So Bloodhound by default has a certain amount of Cypher queries. So over here in Bloodhound in the bottom left, you can see there's a bunch of, queries built in for domain admins and dangerous privileges, things like that. But the Community Edition is somewhat limited. There's not a whole bunch built in to find risky things. It finds a lot of low-hanging fruit and definitely things that can kind of cause issues in your environment. But there's a lot more you can do with this. There's a lot more potential here because of the Cypher query language. And the Cypher query language, unfortunately, is not the easiest to use. It's like SQL, right? But just different. And I, struggle with creating custom Cypher queries. Now you can go on GitHub and you can look for Cypher queries that others have created, and you can use those. However, because Bloodhound has kind of transitioned a little bit in kind of, it was open source initially, and then they've kind of updated it and kind of made some changes and modifications. Not all of those Cypher queries will work. So I found it was a struggle to kind of customize these Cypher queries to find exactly what I was looking for. And a friend of mine, Sam Erdy, turned me onto this tool a few months ago, maybe a little while ago, and I never got a chance to look at it. But then I did, and I was really surprised with what information it showed and how verbose the results were and the reporting was. So I'm going to switch over to AD Miner and what you get. But essentially first is, I'll just show you if I can, there we go. I can click this. There we go. So you install this tool. It's very straightforward. There's instructions on their GitHub repo. But essentially you set up you start Bloodhound. So you start the database, you ingest your Bloodhound file into Bloodhound. and then you run this AD Miner tool. It connects to the Neo4j database, and then it runs all these Cypher queries and puts it in an HTML report. So here's what it looks like. You can see that it's running a whole bunch of different Cypher queries, and this is kind of like the output of what it looks like. And what you get is this chart, this pretty HTML chart, or report, if you will. So it's an HTML file. There's some JavaScript and CSS, obviously, to make it pretty. But it's nice because it's just an HTML report. So it's very responsive. You don't have to wait. And like with Bloodhound, if you've got a big environment, you click on something, you got to wait, and like it takes a long time to render. With this, it's just an HTML report. So it's pretty cool. So I'm just going to walk around a couple of the sections and kind of show off some of the features of this that I think are neat. So right off the bat, it shows you kind of a risk rating, right? Critical. This is my lab that I have, a whole bunch of stuff misconfigured in. So it's critical. It's really bad. It's intentionally misconfigured, but it shows you kind of a breakdown on the left-hand side there. Immediate risk, potential. So these are kind of like your high, medium, lows, right? It shows a little bit of a summary of the environment. How many users, computers, domains, etc. And shows you a breakdown of those things. So pretty nice. What I like kind of the most is two things. One is this indicators of exposure. It breaks it down into different categories. So permissions, passwords, Kerberos, and miscellaneous. And each of these, it shows you kind of like the high, medium, low of the vulnerabilities that have been found. So this is nice, for screenshotting reports. Like if you want to take a screenshot of this, include it in the report, that can be kind of handy. And there's going to be other things I'm going to show that are really handy for reporting as well. But I want to show kind of what I think is nice above and beyond what Bloodhound kind of gives you and shows you out of the box. So again, this has got a whole bunch of additional Cypher queries built in. And so on the right-hand side, you can see all these dangerous issues it found. So you can look and you can click on each one of these and look at the different details that it finds. So some of these, obviously, Bloodhound can find, like Kerberostable accounts. Bloodhound has a Cypher query built in that can find this, right? And this is kind of what it looks like. So it's a nice breakdown showing you the last time the password changed, when the account was created. And if you click on the SPN, it shows you the SPNs that are there. Cool, nice. Bloodhound can show you that too. So that's not super, impressive on its own. But when you get into some other things, I think it's really interesting. So when you hover over these little boxes here, these little diagram icons, it gives you information about the issue. So this one, I'm going to click on 86 users have a path to DA, which is domain admins. So it gives you this little chart or this little graph here, and then you can select the kind of the attack path that you want to look at. So you can look at the user path. So this is like user accounts that have a path to domain admins. You can look at computer paths, groups, OUs, GPOs, etc. So if we click on the user path, we can see, cool, here are all the user paths to domain admins. Now this is very similar to Bloodhound, if you will. The one difference is this has, if you notice, this has like curved lines, which is nice. So in Bloodhound, you only have like straight lines, right? And sometimes it can kind of like, from a screenshot perspective, it can be hard to like get stuff like situated just nice. So with this, you can have curved lines, which is really neat. You can like have these curved lines. So I don't know, just a minor difference, but it's super cool. The other thing I like about this from a screenshotting perspective is not only it shows you the path, but it also highlights it. So if I click on like domain users, it highlights this whole path through to the end. So you can see it kind of as one thing. And then you can take it up one notch and you click on this little like wavy line icon and it separates this out into its own like little path window thing. And then you can take a screenshot and just that. Whereas like in Bloodhound, if you have a whole bunch of stuff, right? Let me go to illustrate this, like, let's go to, so if you have like a big graph like this and you want to like isolate something out, you can do like a certain path finding. So you can do like low priv user to eureka.local. and then you can like separate this out, and you can, you know, organize this how you want for a screenshot, right? What's nice though is you can do it right from this view in AD Miner. So you just select it, click the icon, and boom, you've got the path. So it's a little bit easier, a little bit nicer to kind of like separate this out for reporting and from a screenshot and kind of viewing perspective. So that's pretty nice. It shows you this. The other nice thing is you can search in here. So there's not a lot of information in here. If I get rid of this and I expand this, if I open the cluster, we can see all of these members here, right? This is domain users, right? These are all my users. Let's say I want to search for them, and I want to search for a user. So I can search in this box in the top right-hand side. I can search for the username. I click on the username, and it highlights the user right here. Boom. And I can hone in directly on that user. With Bloodhound, you can kind of do that, but if I go back to like a Cypher query like this, there's no, like, I can search like this, but there's not like a good, you know, like you can search with here, and you can kind of select it. So it's a similar kind of view as AD Miner, and you can kind of search through this kind of in a similar way. So that's another really nice feature of it. Like I said, in addition to what Bloodhound has built in, there's some additional queries that I find are really nice, and additional like views. Another one that I want to showcase is like this one. So this is dangerous paths, and these are dangerous paths to domain admins, right? So if I click on this objects to domain admin privileges, it shows me a breakdown of how many paths there are for specific like groups or users, domains, etc. So it says eureka.local has 124 paths to domain admins. So this kind of gives you an idea of what you can hone in on. This is something that's not really included in what Bloodhound gives you out of the gate. So if you just like pull up Bloodhound data, you might not necessarily know what to focus on, right? But I know now that I can focus on like the users container or eureka.local or domain users that has 90 paths or everyone. So I can kind of focus in and figure out what groups, what users I want to focus on. So this is really nice. You can hover over all these and kind of look at what's in here. The other thing that's nice is this control paths. So I'm gonna go back and, so this is dangerous control paths. This is something that I really like about Pingcastle. Pingcastle will give you like these control paths. They might not necessarily lead to domain admin or full control over the environment, but it might be a control path over some other object or even some security group or a privileged account, something like that. So this dangerous control paths over OU has another interesting element, which is this target interest. So it's like, it knows like, oh, this is probably like a high value target, as they would call it in Bloodhound, right? So this admin's OU is probably a high value target. So it highlights this with red stars, and then you can click on the path, you can click on the object list or the inbound list, and you can kind of see, okay, oh, cool, test low priv user has generic all over admins. Now, the reason I like AD Miner in this situation is because you might not necessarily find this with Bloodhound out of the gate. Because Bloodhound has a Cypher query. If I clear this out. Bloodhound has a Cypher query for, where is it? Dangerous privileges for domain users. And you can see no results match your criteria. So it's like, shoot. So you would have to figure out like, how do you customize this for like specific users? You'd have to know the specific user to target potentially. To find this, you'd have to kind of do some investigating to find this really in Bloodhound, based on my perspective. Now, if anybody has a better way for finding this kind of thing, where it's like a specific user, I'd love to kind of learn and get better at that. But in AD Miner, it shows you this control path. It's like, hey, test user has generic all over admins. And that's as simple as, again, going to this OU control paths section and looking at this. And it shows you which ones to focus on here, which is really cool.
So it seems like a data perspective, AD Miner is a lot more digestible and I want to say user friendly in terms of finding what you want.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you combined Bloodhound with Ping Castle and kind of in my mind, because Ping Castle has a whole bunch of rules built in for analyzing Active Directory environments. It's kind of like that. It's got all of these rules built in, which are the Cypher queries that go above and beyond what's built into Bloodhound in its default form or out of the box. So now, that being said, all of the information that's found in AD Miner can be found from Bloodhound, right? The data comes from Bloodhound. But these have additional Cypher queries that these folks who created this tool have gone and they've built out those Cypher queries. So you could take those queries, obviously, throw them into Bloodhound. There's a lot you could do with this, but this is nice from a reporting standpoint, from a sysadmin perspective, from a tracking perspective, right? It's like, okay, I run Bloodhound, but like, what do I do as a sysadmin, right? Like, okay, cool, I find these attack paths, but what if I want to put some reporting behind it or some analytics and show that we're improving over time? AD Miner is really great for that. We can say like, oh, cool, we were at a D 3 months ago, now we're at a B. Awesome, and you can kind of show improvement over time. So that's really nice from a reporting and analysis standpoint.
So talk to me about it from a red teaming perspective. So like, how noisy is the tool? Does it get flagged? Does it get caught by AV, EDR, things of that nature?
Question. So the great thing about this tool is you don't run this on a client environment. This is all done locally. So you grab the Bloodhound database, and that makes noise in the client environment, right? You run Bloodhound, that will probably be flagged in its default form, but you run Bloodhound in the client environment, you pull this data back, and then you run AD Miner on like your hardware on your system. Mm-hmm. So there's no detection implications there from that perspective.
Okay. So AD Miner's dependent on Bloodhound output, right?
Yep, exactly. So you spin up Bloodhound, AD Miner will connect to your Bloodhound database, pull that information out, run the queries on it, and create this nice HTML report.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, it shows all sorts of interesting things like users not in protected users group. It has queries for things like where's the paths to admin SD holder, control paths already showed. 2 non-DA or DC objects have DC sync privileges, which you can also find in Bloodhound 2, but it shows you kind of a different look at this. So really interesting. It's a nice adaptation to take the Bloodhound data and the information you get from that and create like a nice HTML report with some reporting behind it, some like risk ratings behind it. So really nifty, super cool tool to use. And something I definitely recommend sysadmins take a look at, especially if you're running Bloodhound in your environment, and especially for pen testers to kind of take a look at. If you're like me and you are terrible at Cypher queries. So
when in engagements do you run this? Is it typically at the end of a pen test, or is this kind of something that you front load to get useful data for Privask and things like that?
Yeah, I'll usually run Sharphound the collector within the first couple days of the engagement. Kind of just depends on goals and how the engagement is going. But I'll usually run Sharphound within the first couple of days of the engagement. I'll pull this data out, and then I'll use this to kind of formulate additional attack paths or additional things that need investigating. The one that I think I get the most use out of is this control path one. Because on a more modern environment, you're going to have a whole bunch more here. My lab environment's pretty small. But you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff here. You're going to have all different relationships and different permissions and different control paths, if you will, to look at. And it might not be, as obvious as like, hey, this test low privilege user has generic all on the admin's OU, right? It might be, Susie in accounting has reset password on, the help desk group. And the help desk group, has IT admins in it that are also domain admins or something like that. So it might be, non-obvious like that. It could also be like Susie in accounting has generic all on, some other group that's not admins, but it's another group that they shouldn't have access to or be able to reset passwords for and things like that. So the control paths is really a really interesting adaptation of the Bloodhound data. And that's something that out of the box, you kind of have to hunt around for and kind of look at the group names. And before, when I used to do this, I would literally look at all the group names, all the OU names, and I would look at what the names were to see if anything interesting caught my radar. And I found that when I ran AD Miner, I was potentially missing stuff that might be important that wouldn't necessarily be full control over the domain, but still is a misconfiguration that could allow a user to do something that they shouldn't in that environment. Cool. So this is really cool. Any other questions about this? Those were good questions, Tyler.
No, you did a great job explaining it. It looks really neat.
Cool. So yeah, this is at github.com, Mazars Tech AD Miner. So definitely go check it out in combination with Bloodhound if you're not using those already, because those are super cool tools. All right. Cool. So yeah, that's our episode. Hopefully you got value out of that. Hopefully that was interesting for you. If you have any questions about those tools and kind of how we use them, or if you want help using them in your on your own environment or something like that, give us a shout. Let us know also if you like this type of episode, whether you're a pen tester or a sysadmin or a CISO or an IT director. I'd love your feedback on this type of episode where we show tools and kind of how we use them and kind of how that affects the engagement and the value we get out of it for clients and things like that. So we would love to do more of that stuff if it brings you value. So that's our episode. We release new episodes every Wednesday. So be sure to check us out on offsec.blog. Check us out on LinkedIn, on all the socials, and of course at secureIT360.com if we can help you there. Take care, everybody.